Human design is a part science, part spiritual system that tells you who you came here to be. You have your own blueprint, your own way of becoming successful, your own way your dreams are going to come true, the way you'll experience the most joy and fulfillment. The instruction manual for how to move through the world is custom to you. When you act according to that manual, when you act as the real you, everything in life comes to you with more ease and less resistance. We all know we're different, yet we're still acting like there's one way to do life. Let's talk about it. To find out your design and the designs of the people in your life, you can visit myhumandesign.com or download the My Human Design app in the App Store and on Google Play. I really want to talk about diet today, and I'll tell you why. Because in human design, there is an aspect of your chart which we call the 4 transformations. And the 4 transformations are all about how you come into your genius. So there are 4 different steps. And the first one is your digestion. And you can look at what your digestion is inside your app or on the website, myhumandesign.com. But basically, the idea is that in order for this transformation to happen, where you basically at the end are unlocking your genius. Human design believes that everyone has genius that sits inside of them. And that when you open up spiritually, psychically, energetically, emotionally, all of those things, and mentally, you can become genius level at life, right? Like that's when you just absolute are living in mastery on this material plane. But the first step to these 4 transformations is your digestion. And the founder of human design, Ra Uru, used to say that digesting, right, is the building blocks that you're putting inside your body. So you have to make sure, first of all, that you're giving yourself the right even ingredients upon which genius even has a chance to be built upon, right? Built from. And so, we sort of know that, we need to eat well to be in good health and everything. But I want to add to this conversation because I just feel like there is so much noise about the right diet to have at the moment. And everything is so trend driven, where I'm just absolutely gobsmacked that we can be that swayed into being absolutely convicted 1 minute that vegan is the thing. And then it seems like you blink and 2 minutes later and everyone is absolutely equally convinced about keto, and you blink again and everyone is absolutely hell-bent on getting 30 grams of protein. And so because Ra used to say that, food is the most dense form of conditioning, that's why we are so easily conditioned by it. And that's why it matters to us so much. That's why food is such a sort of touchy subject, because it is an intimate act. How you nourish yourself, what you put in, how it makes you look and feel as a result, like all of that. The reason why it's so touchy is because looking and feeling good on a deep soul level, we know is conducive to us then being able to do other things with, right? Like when you look good and you feel good, it's much easier to reach for good thoughts. It's much easier to have high consciousness. You have space in your brain. So the reason why I want to talk about this today is because as the paradigm is changing, there's a couple of different food principles that are also sort of coming more to importance. One of those things is that it's not so much about what you're eating, right? It's not about eat blueberries because they give you this, or are blueberries better than raspberries, and then just kind of micro dissecting the two of them. It's more about what you're not doing. And if what we're doing ultimately is we are eating for a feeling of levity, because this is a time when we can spiritually fly. And so our diet is a very, very low-hanging fruit, easy tool to be able to open up more levity. Because think about it, if it's the densest thing, then if you attack the lowest thing, right, and you change that and you focus your intention on that, then obviously that's the easiest and quickest way to open up a lot of levity. So number one, the thing that we really miss in health is it's not really about what you're eating, it's about what you're not eating. And ultimately, that's what all healthy diets have in common is like, most diets, what you're avoiding is the processed food, is the junk food, is the cheese mixed with the pasta. You're either eating the cheese or the pasta, and you're usually mixing it with vegetables, depending on what diet it is, right? So or you're eating exclusively meat, but it's not because you're necessarily leaving out the vegetables. It's because, if you came from a diet where you're eating meat and Coke and fries and bread, and you just go to eating meat, what is that doing? It is including the presence of more levity than what you had before. So a diet is only going to work for you if there is a lightening up compared to what you were doing before. And that's why objectively, these diets aren't better or worse than other things. It's more about, is it the next level up for you for where you are at? Now, it's not just about physical levity, it's also about mental and emotional levity, right? So for example, someone could be experiencing levity if they were juice cleansing all the time, and now they're going back to eating more things and giving themselves more range because they're not being so hard and heavy on their spirit. So there's obviously different things, and I'm not saying it's always lightening up physically that is the trick. But at the moment, because also what we're beginning and what science is going to absolutely corroborate this in times to come, we'll have receipts, is that it isn't actually food exclusively that feeds us. Our DNA, 98% of DNA is a light conductor, right? So what feeds us is light, is energy, is the sun, is oxygen, is air. And so as our bodies lighten up to adjust to this new paradigm where, we've talked about it so many times in the workshops and the app, we're in a time when the gaps between time, space, and motion are shortening. We are in a time when everything is feeling more airy, less grounded. We are flying high. We are making quantum leaps. Things are happening out of nowhere. So our bodies need to adjust. And so the way you're going to eat in the new paradigm is, what things do we need that feed our spirit without having rhyme or reason, without having the structure of, I need someone to tell me what I'm going to eat today and then need to make sure that I eat the same tomorrow. But really understanding that food is a secondary tool that you pull on to sometimes support you physically, also sometimes to support you emotionally, as another thing, another spiritual tool, just like you would pull in a meditation when you need a meditation, right? So it's the same thing with food. Like, do you need meat because the air is so airy, the air is airing, and because things are feeling so light that sometimes you need to come back down, right? In which case the meat is medicine. But if you are in a time when you feel like you're flying high and you don't want to be weighed down, then the meat is going to feel like poison. So it really is about understanding that all foods are a toolbox, and to really consciously go in and say, I need this, any food, natural, not natural, any food, because I know my system. I know what makes it feel this. I know what makes it feel that. And I know how to get it when I need the feeling, when I need the frequency, when I need to tap into a certain sensation. And so the reason why I say that is because we're all sitting here battling each other and believing, again, that we're like homogenized around food and that we need to get 30 grams of protein in. And ultimately, that is going to be weighing a lot of us down right now who need to be tapping into this energy of flying high. And again, I'm definitely not demonizing protein. I'm definitely not demonizing meat. But just be careful about why you let that in and be your own energy reader. What I mean in this sense is test it out on your body. If you feel like you need a nap afterwards and what your soul is right now wanting to do is to make a lot of changes in your life and to feel light, maybe that's not the best thing. However, you also might be a person who meat does make you feel lighter than, for example, grains. So it's not even about me saying, oh, meat makes everyone feel heavy, right? It's not that grains make everyone feel heavy. It's not that, fruit sometimes for me, and we talked about this, you and I, Taylor, fruit is almost too high for me sometimes. Like I feel like my head's going to spin off my body. And so I need some level of groundedness in this time. And so for the last however long it's been, I haven't really gravitated towards it. And this is also where I bring back a human design lens, because how you're going to know what is the right thing for you always comes back to listening to your authority. So I know for me now, if I think about a food and it makes me smile, it makes me think that's like a happy making food because I'm emotional authority, then I eat it. If I feel like I'm going to have to force myself to eat it because my mind is saying it's good for me, or because my mind is saying it's the most cleansing thing on the planet and it's good for everyone, or because it's telling me that I need to eat something because muscle is the key to longevity. The key to longevity is life force. And food is one of the tools that you can use and abuse and respect. Obviously, I say that to be glib, but use in service to you. It's not this thing that needs to be worshipped. You are in charge. You get to decide when you pull it in, when you've had enough of it, and then you get to move on without attaching a story to it. So if you feel like you have to convince yourself into doing something against your body's natural instincts and inclinations, that's probably a bad sign. And so the reason why I wanted to say this today is because I just feel like so many people are also feeling this way, but maybe just need someone else to say it's also valid, because we're just getting bombarded with so much of the opposite right now. And I just feel like, my gosh, what if everyone doesn't want to be eating 6 eggs within 30 freaking minutes of waking up? And what if, as I've done many times in so many areas of life, I'm betraying my natural instinct because it seems to me like everyone else is agreeing on the same thing? And what if, to some extent, it's Emperor's New Clothes, where it just needs a couple people to be like, hold on a second, am I the only one seeing here that, he's naked? And so this is how we start to break these sort of illusions that everyone is on the same page about something, which then just pulls in more people to believe the illusion and to ignore what their real sensations are. And so all that matters, you don't have to shout this from the rooftops. You can just give yourself the permission slip to eat the way that you want to eat, and trust that your body has an intelligence of where it's going to get you to go if you listen to it. You don't have to know what it's going to lead to, but I can promise you it's going to be a much bigger package than just muscle or just longevity or just cleansing. Like, there is so many more layers that are to do with your purpose and your genius and feeding what you need to be fed in the way you need to be fed that day. A certain frequency you're supposed to tap in because it's the next best frequency you're supposed to tap into compared to the one you were in yesterday. There's insane amounts of intelligence, and we're sitting here going, every woman needs to eat within 30 minutes of waking up. And how we've belittled the complex mysticism of how we nourish ourselves is heartbreaking to me. And that's why I just feel so called to start having a conversation about this with everyone who's in our cluster.
We actually did a full episode talking about you just mentioned using your authority to decide which foods are right for you. So if you're interested in that specific conversation, I'll link it in the show notes so you can listen to it. But what I find really interesting about what you're bringing up is I was always someone that I wanted to be fit and like look good. That was what was my driving force in eating healthy. Okay. And I had such a hard time with it. And when you're saying like, oh, these diets, this is what's going to work for you. This is what's going to work for you. And we're kind of like spinning out of like trying to make ourselves look good, or what are we motivated by? What are we doing? What are we even doing here? We're spinning out. That's actually part of what's preventing us from the goal, right? Of vitality and health. When I first started working with you and I really started to observe that health was not even it was not a dilemma for you to eat healthy. It just was what you did. And I'd never understood, I'd never seen that played out. When you shared this with me about health and food and our digestion being what leads to our genius, everything clicked for me. All of a sudden, it became 0% hard to take care of my body because that mattered to me. And I think sharing this conversation actually gives some people a motivator that might actually do the trick that getting abs might not be doing for you. Like, I thought that was doing it for me. It wasn't. Suddenly I was like, wait a second, I'm about to put this cheeseburger and fries in my body. And when I make this choice, I'm actually blocking potential genius from coming out of me. Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And sometimes that cheeseburger will be like, I just want to reconnect to feeling fully alive or having effort energy, or I've been flying high all week and now I need to come down and it's Friday night. But yeah, understanding that everything is here to support your genius. I feel the same way, because I'm like, Vanity, I think, is a first portal, and I want to remove any shame that people have over that, because I think that, like I said, I do think it's a deeply spiritual thing. We are aesthetic beings. We want to feel beautiful. We orient towards beauty in this world, and we also want to feel good because, if I'm full and like sleepy, there's no way I'm in a state to feel like so connected to, life. And I'm going to want to numb out. I'm going to want to just watch silly things. Again, nothing wrong with those things, but I just know that it's not the place I want to necessarily live in, 80% of the time. It's a place I want to live in some of the time, and maybe that changes. So I think that's an okay first driver that most of us connect to, and men included. They want to look good, but in different ways. Usually they want to bulk up and add weight, right? But ultimately, if you are on a spiritual journey and you get to have, like you said, this click into place where you realize the benefit and the cost are both so much bigger, then it kind of becomes a no-brainer. And I don't know about you, but I also feel that especially as women, we have these days where, we talk about this all the time. You don't ever look the same on two of the same days. Like, you wake up and your face fluctuates. Like, the way you look at yourself in the mirror, you look different. And, if depending on how tuned in you are, or tuned you are to yourself, there'll be a day where you feel more this or more bloated or more whatever. And so for me, even though I am hyper aware of my body because, my sun personality is gift 19, so I'm sensitive to everything. Like, everything feels like sandpaper to me, from the outside world and all the stimulants. It makes it easier to just realize that it goes up and down, so it's not something to try to have to force or fluctuate, right, or resist. But also that if I know that I'm ultimately serving my real soul mission, then actually it's kind of cute the day that I'm bloated, and it's kind of sweet that I know that I treat myself well. I like how I look overall. It's never going to be perfect, and that's also where the ego gets in the way, because the ego is always going to say there's something else you could do. There's always something else you could fix. There's always something you can whatever. So I feel like if you get yourself to a baseline where you're happy enough at this midpoint that you can kind of, plus or minus 5 degrees on a daily basis, then it doesn't really matter. And then, if you think about your body as this, how do I put it? The scene that the play happens on, you need the scene, you need the set, right? So make a good set, and then you have to think about it less, and then you can get on with the play. But when we're obsessing about the set, the play never gets to happen, or the play happens and it misses us, it passes us right by. Or if we don't build a good set at all, then the play is a total chaos, and then the actors are like, in the stands trying to do it in the seats, and that's another thing. So it's like we have to bring the body on board. We have to honor the body, but we also have to not give it the full power. The body is just the portal through which the spirit can be housed. And I think we spoke about this on a couple of episodes ago about how this whole thing is an experiment to see if consciousness can be housed in form, right? Because consciousness, before there were physical beings, consciousness was just an etheric concept, right? It was just a potential. And so in sort of human design cosmological theory, this whole thing is so that our soul, there's a thing called our consciousness, our soul, whatever you want to call it, magnetizes to a certain form, and those things come together to create you in this specific life. But without the polarity and the magnetism between the soul and the body, the movie doesn't happen. And so the body is a very important part of that equation. It's just not everything, because we live in a world that overemphasizes form. But then sometimes in the spiritual world, we underemphasize form. And you'll notice that we actually can't get away from it. As much as we try to think that we don't emphasize form, we're either neglecting it, in which case we are still emphasizing it, and it's going to come back and bite us. We're pretending like it doesn't matter, right? Because we're so spiritual that the body doesn't matter. Or we're still doing it, but just shaming ourselves for it. So I also want to give licensing to, yes, it's wonderful to want to look good and want to feel good, and but to come up with your own identity of what it feels like to look beautiful, right? So give you a small example. I don't wear foundation. My skin isn't perfect, but I just think that I feel more beautiful when I'm not wearing it. Okay, do I look airbrushed? No. But I'm okay with that. And I don't think that I need to look airbrushed to feel beautiful or to look beautiful. Um, and I might change my mind one day, but that's just where I'm at right now. There's certain things I like to buy into, and there's certain things that I don't. And that's the whole point about this life, is everything is a menu. And it's just such a crying shame that we let someone else go up to the buffet and tell us what's good, when actually we just want to be able to go up every single day and choose what we want to choose. And I don't just mean in food, I just mean in life too.
Yeah, I also don't want to demonize the motivation of like aesthetically looking good, because absolutely that is still in the back of my mind. And what's funny though is that what I was trying to say is that that just didn't click the easiness into place for me. This did. And because it just became so easy for me to make the choice to just choose something healthier, actually I am aesthetically happier in my body than I ever have been. And actually me being aesthetically happier has also fed my soul. So it's almost kind of, I went through it. I had to go through a different door to get here. But the other thing I wanted to point out too is that you were saying sometimes we, we'll need to eat meat because we maybe need to feel grounded, or we need to do things on different days. Something I noticed, because I typically, like 90% of the time, it's so easy for me to make a healthy choice, right? I'm at that place now. But I don't want to say like an addiction to social media, but it's certainly something that I spend a lot of time with. And I know that my relationship with it is something that I need to watch and be careful. And so I removed TikTok from my phone 2 weeks ago. And immediately I was like needing ice cream. I literally bought 2 things of ice cream and just was eating ice cream all of a sudden. And I couldn't stop. And I realized all of a sudden that I removed a vice and suddenly I needed something to fill that. And then as soon as I realized that I was using the ice cream to fill that, then all of a sudden it became easy to be like, oh, okay, that's really precious of me and sweet that I needed that. And I even still, after I had that realization, I was like, it's okay that you want to use this right now, because maybe this is a step in the right direction of using this vice, and then it will be easier to let this vice go. And I just don't beat myself up about it anymore. And I think that that ultimately too keeps my body healthier in general, right? Because I'm approaching it with this different perspective of, oh, this is not this evil thing that I'm putting into my body.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's also really so key, that you realize that a couple of days of ice cream, if you're playing the long game, which hopefully we all are, isn't the thing. And that ultimately, if you're seeing it as medicinal, because it's like it's like those back wheels on the bicycle that you kick off, right? Because it's helping you in that moment to come off the social media thing, then that's so perfect at that time. And then when you're ready to come off it, you're ready to come off it. And like I said, it's amazing to know when you need to numb, or when you need to come down, when you need to ground, what it is that helps you switch off. Because I also think in the spiritual community, it's like so shame to be like, doing that kind of behavior, but sometimes you need to. And also let's remember that as souls, it's also kind of fun. I watch morning shows at nighttime on YouTube. I don't live in the UK, but I'm from there, and I'll watch like our equivalent of the Today Show, and I'll listen to whatever they're talking about, and it's just fun, and it's just light, and it helps my brain switch off. But as I'm doing it, the conversation I'm having in my head is not, oh my God, this is so shallow, and I wouldn't want people to know, like whatever else other silly thing would be happening. It's just like, oh, this is so sweet. Like, look at this, like little daily little moment of like mundanity to like calm down. And aren't we humans so wonderful? Because we need the sacred and we also need the profane. And so to deny again our need for one to try and be the other, that's too extreme, and it is going to throw us out of whack. Now there might be times when I don't need it at all, because I'm having a week where I'm just like bouncing off the walls, or I'm going out every night or whatever. But then there'll be other weeks where I don't want to go out at all, and then I'll just want to watch hours of morning shows. And then once I finish with the UK one, I'll go to whatever, Hodo and Jenna or Kelly Clarkson or whoever it is, you know?
Will you too just share a little bit about how, because when you told us to look for our digestion type in the app or on the website, but the digestion isn't necessarily going to tell you, if you've never looked at it, it's not going to tell you what food to eat. So will you just kind of cover a little bit about what we're looking at when we look at the digestion and the decision making again, just
Yeah.
to clear things up for us?
So, your digestion is the way that you're designed to digest life. And there's 12 different types of digestion. So, the big part of digesting life is digesting food because, like I said, it's the material that you're putting into your body. It's literally creating your cells potential of whether they can actually be genius type of cells or not. So every single person has a specific way that they're supposed to take in food. And that's really what your digestion tells you is like, you know, if you, for example, are an indirect light person like me, then eating breakfast is absolutely stunting my brain's ability to get out of its own way and open up its genius, because genius doesn't really come from us. It's more about how we get out of the way. So essentially what you're doing when you're eating according to your digestion is you're unclogging where you're clogging, right? So your digestion is the way you're supposed to be designed to eat. So sometimes it is specific to the food. So some people, for example, are cold food eaters, which means that when they eat really hot stuff, it blunts their genius. But other people, it's like the timing. Other people, it's the regularity. Other people, it's the temperature. So it all depends on what digestion type you are. So that's that. But the way you're supposed to decide which foods to eat is your authority. And that's the way you're supposed to decide anything in your life. And it's the same with food. Now, because we're so conditioned to think, what's the best diet for this blood type, or for this Myers-Briggs, or for this, for women, for cycle syncing, for whatever, we have blunted this ability to realize that all food is on the table at all times. And every single day, the questions just start from the beginning. Now, I know that's exhausting. I know we want to have the known and we want to feel secure and we want to have the one and done. We want to have the package so that we never have to be in this mind stories ever again of, is this going to make me feel good? Is it going to make me look good? Whatever. Listen, as you get to know your body, you are going to know certain things that are absolutely off the table for you until maybe one day you get a real strong pull towards it. And that's when you bring it back on. But you really, really want to understand that that's how you decide what to eat that day. So for example, if you are a generator and your authority is sacral, you have to make sure you're excited about that food. It doesn't matter if it's kale. If you don't feel a visceral pull towards it, it is going to be unhealthy for you. Now, I remember saying that in the eating videos that I recorded probably 7 years ago, specifically about kale. And that was when kale was all the rage. It was in every salad, every chip, every snack, every chocolate. It was in everything. Okay. And since then, there's been this like other conditioning of like kale is bad for you because of this and because of that and because it creates whatever. But I don't even know what people say about kale. But the interesting thing is to now see that people could wrap their heads around maybe kale is not right for everybody, right? But to remember a time when that was absolutely inconceivable. So if you do want to know more about these certain things, because there are different specificities based on the energy types, and we can link to this in the show notes. There are deeper dive videos on eating for your energy type. But even if you don't go that deep, you can practice, what do I want to eat today? And I love the example, we've shared it before, about you and your splenic authority. One day waking up and you drank non-dairy for how many years, and your spleen was like, get the regular milk today. And then you did, and then you drank it until one day it was like, you're done. And the same with me. I've been vegan, quote unquote, for over 16 years. But there was a time 2 years ago when I was actually going through a real hard time. Maybe it was 3 years ago now. I was going through a breakup. I was really just spinning and didn't feel like I was in touch with myself and needed to come back to myself. And for some reason, I just wanted salmon. And I ate salmon every single day for 3 weeks. And then one day I was like, okay, I'm done. That's it. My emotions don't get kind of smiley and happy when I look at the salmon anymore. And so there we are. And it takes work. Listen, this is where we're so deep into our experiments at this point where we have enough evidence that we can trust these things. But I recommend that at least in the beginning, even if you don't act on these, intuitions of yours, at least start to note them down so you can get a feel for what your body's trying to tell you. Even if right now you're still doing the thing that everyone else is doing, just start to be like, you know what? I hear you. I hear you saying to me, drink regular milk. And I hear my mind going crazy because it's inflammatory, because it's this, because it's that, da, 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 da. But understand that what the mind is going off is that shockingly, saddeningly deductionist approach that we have taken to food, where if you've ever seen, for example, Kirlian photography, which is when they take a picture of like the cross section of the tomato and you can see the amount of light that is like radiating off this tomato. All you have to do is see a picture of that to understand that food is so much more than the freaking beta carotene or whatever it is in tomatoes. And we have to mix it with the other thing that it has to be absorbed and blah, 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 blah. Like, and it's so freeing how much as well, if you want to talk about being a genius, like how much of your mind space you free up by not absorbing all this information. Because the real trick of the mind, and this is, as I say this, it kind of makes me giggle every time I think about it, is like, there's no amount of knowing more that would ever make that belief system satisfied. So the only way to really break that belief system is to decide that enough is enough and that it's such a moot exercise because it's never going to tire. And the more you go into the illusion, the more it brings you into the illusion. It's going to tell you, you need more, you need to learn more, you need to know more, you need to know more, you need to know more, 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 more. And you're going to feel maybe less and less in touch with yourself. And so it really is like a negative downward cycle of mind playing tricks on you.
And I will say too that I think you're a good person to share this perspective because one, you really understand the science of food, and two, you have gift 19 and you're very tapped into your personal needs. This is something that I've learned being with you too, where it comes so easy to you to know what you need. So when you're telling us like every day when you wake up to start with that blank slate of like asking yourself, what do I actually need today? Love that you can be an example for that. I would advise people that that is possible. I've incrementally gotten closer to checking my needs every day. But I understand that, like you say, it sounds really hard to not go based off of this, research information or this information that we've proven as the only true thing, because it's easier to wake up every day and just follow that information because most of us don't have the time in the day to really think about that. But for me, I've just sort of made check and balances with myself where I don't check every day. For a couple weeks, I will just follow what I know the decision was for a while. I am a very consistent, routine-oriented person. So I literally will just eat the same thing every single day. But I just make sure that, every couple weeks, I check in with myself. Like I've been eating fruit every single morning. And I genuinely never thought I would not do it because I love it so much. But all of a sudden this week, I've noticed, I know it's so random that we're talking about this because it's been like 3 years of me eating fruit every morning.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I was like, you know what? It used to make me feel so hydrated to have melon in the morning. And all of a sudden, it's feeling different where I feel like it's, I don't know, skyrocketing my sugar or what blood sugar or something. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So I've just checked in with myself. I'm still eating fruit in the morning right now because I don't know what that replacement is right now, and that's okay. But for those of us who maybe don't feel as tapped into what our needs are day to day quite yet, just do mark a check-in in your calendar.
And I also love it's making me think the difference as well is because I'm inconsistent. So maybe inconsistent people need to check more, and consistent people can kind of rinse and repeat more because what's going to work for you today, there's probably going to be some more consistency over time. But also, what you're saying as well is that you are kind of tuned in to yourself every day because one day you noticed from eating it, like, oh, it doesn't give me the same thing as it used to. And so it's more about like just having that awareness and that conversation with yourself of like, if I feel not good, I'm not going to shut it down. Like, just give it airtime. Trust yourself more than anyone else, you know, because the whole point of this whole thing, this whole human design spiel, right, is what if you decided that the best person to be in charge of your destiny was you? That's all this is. It's an invitation to explore that idea. And so it does happen in the micro. It happens in the everyday, right? We talk about having extraordinary lives. We talk about these big visions. We talk about making your dreams come true and becoming a person you dream of being. But the way that you pave that is with this stuff. And that's why this stuff does matter. Is like magic is made in the mundane. And so being able to say, I trust me to make my food decisions over whoever is yakking on about whatever. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that there's no validity. It just means it will work for me if it passes, like you said, my checks and balances. And if it doesn't, without needing to disprove another, without needing to put down another, can I be okay with the fact that I love being me? I love doing it my way. I'm not threatened by someone else thriving in a completely different way than me. I celebrate you and I celebrate me, even if they're the same, even if they're different, it doesn't really matter. And full license and permission to change my mind at any moment without needing to justify to myself why. So for example, for you, noticing your blood sugar going up is very different than all of a sudden if 3 weeks ago prematurely you'd said, I need to stop eating fruit because it's bad for blood sugar, because you weren't getting any downside from that, right? So maybe for the last 3 weeks you needed fruit. And if you hadn't had the fruit, God knows what kind of alchemical things would have been starved and prevented from happening if you jumped the gun early by deciding the thing with your mind rather than with your body.
Yeah. And I think when I first started treating food this way, there is sort of that fear that comes in of like, oh my gosh, scary to not be following the expert advice of somebody else. But I will say that on the other side of that fear, when you eventually get the evidence of how much better you feel when you just trust yourself, that fear dissipates. It just dissipates.
Yeah. It's so good to know and that have that reminder, because you think, because the first step is often the hardest because it's the biggest pivot, you freak out because you're like, oh my God, is it always going to be this way? Is it always going to be this unheld? You know, am I always going to be this unsafe and unsure? But what you're saying, right, where you are now, you're like, I'm still eating the fruit, don't know what it gets replaced with, but you're absolutely fine, is because you've done that enough times. It's not that the messy middle ever goes away necessarily. It maybe shortens, hopefully, but you also feel more comfortable in it. And by the way, that's the thing about security in life. It's not about removing messy middles and unknowns. It's about being so masterful despite and in the unknowns, right? Because if you can be masterful in the time when everything's high and flying, you know, most people can do that. And most people aren't in touch with their power and their agility and their ability and their consciousness when that happens. It's when you're like, oh my God, things are in transition, but look at me and I'm so proud of myself and I'm doing such a good job. Or even like you, I'm just calmer now, or I'm fine with it. Like, wow, what does that do for you? Like, that is like the thing that makes it easier to then realize like, oh, I've got me. I don't need this stuff. And then what happens also is that the hooks that you have in listening to everyone else, it's not that you even have to on purpose loosen them. They just loosen because you've put the power in yourself. And so you have less need for that stuff. And ultimately, that really is the thing I want for us all to know from this food conversation, is that food is not more powerful than you. Food is a frequency and you are a frequency, and some days you'll match and you'll swipe left and you'll swipe right. But if you go at it like, this is here to aid me in my mission, my big ultimate mission, and also in this moment, what is the next step that I need? And also allowing yourself to prioritize the feeling good, because that is the ground, the soil upon which the consciousness can be planted and flourish. Then that's the way we need to start talking about food and creating a sense of levity if we really want to fly in the new paradigm. And this is where I really think what could be so helpful for context is the workshops in the app, especially the ones from about 4 or 5 months ago, because they really talk about this jump, this quantum leap that is available to all of us, the levity that is opening up, how our bodies are lightening up. And so the food noise that we used to look at 20 years ago is now out of date anyway. You know, what we even is affecting us now is out of date because it's still based on where we've come from and not where we're going. So can we have the bravery to go first and create structures and ways that suit us that maybe stick out? But maybe the sticking out is ultimately what is the secret to us rising.